I was told by a friend on Facebook that when you address 1,000 objections rabbinic Jews bring, they bring 1,000 more. It can get tiresome to refute every single argument that a person brings up, Jew or Gentile alike. I just want to look at some objections brought by two individuals in particular. Firstly, I'll be dealing with Saved by Baptism, aka Bible Teacher, on his argument about Psalm 45, 6-7, and Hebrews 1, 8-9. Although I addressed a potential argument that one brings to the table, what I'm going to do is address Saved by Baptism's argument about these texts. One argument that he presents, which was brought to me by Fitzy, was, well, God is the one with the everlasting throne and the scepter is Jesus. That whole point by him misses what Hebrews 1, 8-9 is trying to convey. In the initial context of Psalm 45, the psalmist is speaking of Yahweh's eternal throne. And in Hebrews 1, the Father applies verses 6 and 7 of Psalm 45 to Jesus. It is clear that Jesus is identified as Yahweh himself in the context. Jesus has a scepter of righteousness. Hebrews is not saying that Jesus is the Father's scepter of the kingdom. He is making the identification of Jesus as Yahweh, which totally destroys Saved by Baptism's entire point. Now that's the first argument to shoot down. Second, I want to tackle some of Limit Break 9001's arguments in the comments section of the following videos, which you can take a look at so you can follow what is going on. The videos are called Anointed Ones and Strange Gods, Rabbinic Dilemma 101, and Intellectual Honesty and Abuse of Apologist Statements. I want to go through each of the objections he brought one by one, and I hope to address them the best I can. First is his comments on William Lane Craig, in which he claimed Lane Craig was intellectually honest for saying that the Trinity was not found in the Old Testament. Though later in the actual point, Lane Craig actually goes on to say that the Trinity was not incompatible with anything revealed in the Old Testament. You can find the comment section where he and I spoke to each other in the video. And of course I mentioned that the New Testament writers had the Tanakh as their foundation, to which Limit Break brought the Mormons, supposedly doing the same thing. In point of fact, I mentioned the Zohar has things which are not consistent with the Tanakh itself, to which I was told, well, it's not inspired scripture, I'm talking about canonized scripture. Well, even though the Zohar is not scripture, my whole point is if Limit Break is going to use the Mormons to beat Christians over the head with, would he be consistent in allowing me to use Hasidic Jews to beat Rabbinic Jews over the head with? That's all I asked. To which he ran to a Mormon website called Fair to further bolster his point. If Limit Break were actually to research Mormonism properly, it is polytheistic in content, though they will not use that term. On Facebook, I was sent the same link to that Mormon website, which interestingly on the very same page says the following about the Trinity. It says, quote, usually the very same people who are pressing the case that Mormons are polytheists are some stripe of evangelical Christians who claim to be monotheists, but Trinitarians are not monotheists by definition. Ask a Jew or a Muslim, unquote. What makes this statement about Christians rather reprehensible is that I've yet to come across a counter-missionary or a Muslim apologist who comes even close to representing the Trinity accurately or even having a semi-accurate understanding of it. For example, Tobias Singer's arguments against the Trinity were very shallow and surface level. Very shallow surface level stuff, and no doubt others will probably have the same level of ignorance. It's just sheer nonsense. Next argument I shall address is here's my usage of James White's quotation in my video, Anointed Ones and Strange Gods. Limit Break's objection can be found on that page if you want to take a look, on the comments page of that video. My whole point in using White's quote is that Daniel, being unaware of Jesus, would not present a problem to the Christians regarding Limit Break's objection, which he initially brought to the table. Limit Break then made a point that James White's logic could be applied to Jeroboam and the golden calves, which I have said in the comments page is a red herring, and I stand by that point. The point that White made in response to Anthony Buzzard is strictly relating to the triune God, not anything else. Whereas, in regards to William Lane Craig's point about salvation of the Old Testament saints, his statement has a general principle. One more point I will address, of course, is the subject of the Mormons and the Muslims being brought up again, which completely leaves the Bible entirely. We're off someplace else, as it were. I hardly think that speaking about, well, the Muslims say Jesus and Moses are Muslims, thus you Christians are doing the same thing. I hardly think that that's even remotely the same thing as what Christians do. Here's the thing. The Quran denies any kind of sonship, which would include Israel. In point of fact, the Israelites were fathered spiritually by God in the Tanakh and the New Testament, something completely rejected by Muslims as well as Muhammad. Also, their claim about people of the Bible being Muslims is outright absurd, especially the prostration argument. I could easily point to the Chinese of ancient and modern times and say because of prostration they are Muslims. That's the level of stupidity I hear from some Muslims. Also, the very same James White said the following in his debate with Jalal Abdullah regarding the Trinity, is that it was revealed between the Old and the New Testaments. He has also stated that the Old Testaments did not speak as a Christian speaks. In fact, one straw man from Shadid Lewis that was brought to me regarding the angel of the Lord was they didn't say they saw Jesus, which is a moot point considering it's the Christians' claim that the angel of the Lord is Jesus in pre-human existence, and the claim that the angel is God. Not to mention, Jesus is not called Jesus until the time of the New Testament. No Christian says Abraham said to the angel, "Oh, hello, Jesus, I bow at your feet," or even anything close to it. As far as Abraham was concerned, he was speaking with God, according to Trinitarians. No problem there. And to be honest, there are also other things to go into regarding Muslims. I mean, let's face it, Nat Dimon even points out the fallaciousness of appealing to the word Muhammadin. And he uses the very argument of the Muslims against them by appealing to the words Yeshuati, Yeshuato, to try and say that, Yeshua teaches. Well, actually, what I will do is post a link in the video description. You guys can take a look at the video by Nat Dimon yourself, because it's worth taking a look at. Pretty much shows how silly that the Muslim argumentation is. I mean, let's face it. Don't even compare Christians and Muslims. And I'm not saying this to disrespect the Muslims. There are some that are very intelligent Muslims out there. The main thing is I get sick and tired of rabbinic Jews making the comparison, well, you Christians, the likelihood of you finding your Jesus is about as likely as the Muslims finding Muhammad. Well, newsflash, if we applied the same criteria, finding the Talmud you'll be very hard pressed to find that within the Tanakh. Although it has been claimed that the prophets are part of the oral Torah, and so are the writings, but that's another topic. But anyway, I am kind of skeptical of an oral tradition going back to Moses. Anyway, that's all the arguments. That's all for the arguments in this particular video, and more may come within the foreseeable future, Lord willing. Thanks for taking the time to watch.